Hi, I'm Alex. This is Oh, That's Why, a podcast about JavaScript, finally making sense. Let's dig in. Last week we established the one rule that governs this. Its value is decided by how a function is called, not how it is written. 4 binding rules, 1 priority order, and a method that loses its this the moment you detach it from its object and pass it around as a callback. We ended on that bug. A method passed to set timeout or an event listener, silently losing its connection to the object it belonged to. And I promised you the tools to fix it. Those tools are this episode. There are 3 of them built into every function: call, apply, and bind. They are how you stop being at the mercy of the call site and start dictating what this is directly. Explicit binding, Rule 3 from last week, is these 3 methods. Today we open them up, and then there is the 4th thing. Arrow functions, which are not really a tool for controlling this. They're a completely different kind of function that steps outside the entire 4-rule system. An arrow function does not wait for the call to decide it's this. It decides it's this the moment it is written, based on its surroundings, and then never changes it. No matter how you call it, no matter what you try. By the end of this episode, the callback bug from last week will be fully, permanently solved. 2 different ways. Think about casting an actor in a role. A regular function is an actor without a fixed part. Every night, when they step on stage, someone tells them who they're playing tonight. That's the call site from last week. The performance decides the role. Same actor, different character depending on the night. Now, call and apply are you, the director, walking up to that actor right before they go on and saying, "Tonight you're playing this specific character." You're handing them the role directly for this one performance. The actor goes on, plays exactly the part you assigned, and that's that. Next time, if you say nothing, they're back to being told by the performance. That's what call and apply do. They invoke the function immediately. The actor goes on stage right now, with a this value you specify, overriding whatever the call site would have decided, but only for this single call. Bind is different. Bind is a contract. You walk up to the actor and say, "From now on, in every performance, you play this character." And instead of sending them on stage, Bind hands you back a new actor. One who is permanently locked into that role. You can send this new actor on stage whenever you like, through any door, in any production, and they will always play the character you bound them to. The original actor is untouched. And then, the arrow function. The arrow function is an actor who only ever plays themselves. It does not matter what script you hand them, what role you assign, what contract you offer. Call, apply, bind. None of it works on them. They looked around at the moment they were cast, decided who they were based on their surroundings, and they will be that person in every performance forever. That is lexical this, and it turns out to be exactly what you want more often than you'd expect. Let's take them one at a time. Call. Every function has a method called call. You invoke it as function.call, and the first argument you pass is the value you want this to be inside that function. Any arguments after that get passed to the function as its normal parameters, one by one. So, function.call, object, arg1, arg2. This runs the function immediately with this set to your object and the arguments handed in. It invokes right away. That's the key thing about call. The function runs now. Apply is call's twin, identical in every way but one. Instead of passing the arguments individually, you pass them as a single array. Function.apply, object, array of args. That's the only difference. Call takes arguments one by one. Apply takes them as an array. Both invoke immediately. Both set this to the first argument. A simple way to remember which is which: apply and array both start with the letter A. Now, bind. This is the important one, and the one people misunderstand most. Bind does not invoke the function. That is the whole point. When you call function.bind and pass it this value, it does not run anything. Instead, it returns a brand new function, a copy with this permanently locked to the value you provided. You call that new function later whenever you want, and no matter how you call it, this stays locked. This is why bind is the answer to last week's callback bug. You take your method, bind it to the object it belongs to, and pass the bound version as the callback. Now, when set timeout or the event listener eventually calls it, as a bare standalone function, the way that always broke it before, it does not matter. This was locked in at bind time. The function ignores the call site entirely. Two things about bind that trip people up. First, bind returns the new function. It does not modify the original. If you write function.bind object and don't capture the return value, nothing useful happened. You have to store what bind gives back. Second, and this one surprises people, bind only works once. Once a function has been bound, binding it again does nothing. The second bind is ignored. The first binding wins permanently. And now, arrow functions. The genuinely different one. An arrow function does not have its own this at all. It's not that arrow functions have a special rule for this, it's that they have no this of their own. So when you write this inside an arrow function, JavaScript looks outward, to the scope where the arrow function was defined, and uses that this instead. Lexical this, because it comes from where the function sits in the written code, not from how it is called. And because an arrow function has no this of its own, there is nothing for call, apply, or bind to set. You can call an arrow function with call and pass any object you like. It will be ignored. The arrow function already got its this from its surroundings when it was written, and that is final. This is what makes arrow functions so useful for callbacks. Remember the nested function trap from last week. A regular function inside a method loses the method's this. Replace that inner function with an arrow function, and the problem vanishes. The arrow has no this of its own, so it uses the method's this, exactly what you wanted. No bind, no workaround. It just works. First trap, and it's the mirror image of arrow function's greatest strength. Do not use an arrow function as an object method. If you define a method on an object using arrow syntax, this inside it will not be the object, because arrow functions take this from the surrounding scope. And the surrounding scope of a method defined at the top level of an object is usually the global scope, not the object. So this will be the global object, or undefined, not the object the method lives on. For a method that needs to refer to its own object through this, you need a regular function. Arrow functions are for callbacks and inner functions, not for object methods that use this. Second trap, forgetting that bind returns a new function. I'm repeating it because it's that common. You cannot bind a function in place. Function.bind object on its own line, throwing away the result, does absolutely nothing you can use. You must assign the returned function to something and use that. Third trap, arrow functions, and React. This is where all of this becomes intensely practical. In React class components, event handler methods famously lose their this when passed to a JSX handler, the exact callback detachment bug from last week. For years, the standard fixes were either to bind the method in the constructor or to define the handler as an arrow function class property, which captures the component instance as this lexically. Both work. Both come up constantly in real React code. And now you know precisely why each one works. Bind locks this permanently. The arrow inherits the component's this from the class body where it was written. In modern React, with function components and hooks, this whole category of problem largely disappears. There are no methods, no this to lose. But understanding the mechanism is what separates knowing the fix from understanding it. One more quickly. Arrow functions cannot be used as constructors. You cannot call an arrow function with new. It throws an error. They have no this to construct onto, and no prototype property. Regular functions and classes are for constructing. Arrow functions are not. Call and apply set this for one call. Bind sets it permanently and hands you back a new function. Arrow functions never had their own this to set. They borrow it from wherever they were written. That is the complete picture of this. Last week, how the call site decides it, through 4 rules in priority order. This week, how you take control of it. 3 methods that set it explicitly, and 1 kind of function that opts out of the whole system. Call for immediate invocation with individual arguments. Apply for immediate invocation with an array. Bind for a permanently set copy you call later. And arrow functions when you want this to come from where the code was written, which is why they quietly solved the callback bug the moment they arrived in the language. The companion article on Medium has all 3 methods side by side with the arrow function comparison and the 2 React fixes written out in full. Link is in the show notes. Next week, classes. Are JavaScript classes real? Or are they, as people love to say, just syntactic sugar over prototypes? We've spent this whole season building the pieces, the prototype chain, property descriptors, this and how to control it. Next week, they all come together. I'm Alex Vega. This is Oh, That's Why. 2 weeks on 1 keyword. But this is the keyword that used to end interviews and break code bases. Not for you. Not anymore. See you next week.